response video to a couple of videos, no doubt, on the subject of metaphor and a few other things, on the subject of how we communicate words, what words we use, what concepts we use, what personalities we wear. Which brings up Wise Monkey, who makes, whatever. I haven't seen one of his videos in a while, and he's just basically complaining about the way it's discussed and how some people are too invested in what they're arguing, I guess is a way to paraphrase what he is saying. So they have too much color, too much emotion, maybe. They're too insultable, patronized. Yeah, come on. This is just such nonsense from somebody who uses vernacular like outrageous. You've gone over the edge of whatever, explicit, clear, well-tempered conversation many times, shithead.
I'm not one of those individuals. I'm a secular humanist. However,
yeah, so a secular humanist is sort of becoming another word for another kind of religion. It's just the religion without the God, right? Without the explicit human type God, but instead your God is, just make it up, DNA molecule, whatever, just the infinite purposelessness, the singular, single purposer, the let's keep on doing it because everybody else was doing it and they've been doing it, and so let's just keep doing it, doingers. I mean, come on. It's just a religion without the theater. But the end product is a affirmation of nonsense.
I'm not an individual who clings to an objective truth, which believes objective truth without any proof.
Oh, well, whatever. Truth is truth, right? So there's a fact, a reality here to be described. Objective, subjective. It doesn't really matter. I don't care whether you're arguing it from any position, but yeah, it's all about the argument. You're saying there's no proof. Well, there are proofs. There are logical proofs. Benatar pointed one out in his book. He basically explained that you can't really, the whole life mechanism is sort of dependent on the need engine that it creates. A living thing is a need engine, and the satisfaction only comes through creation of that need engine, and that's intrinsically problematic. And the suffering is just inevitable. It's just part of what the package includes. And so you can't, and you just, there's just this practical reality that we don't serve a function. Therefore, there's no necessity to open the door to the negative, to create the opportunity for the negative to get out. There's just no reason to, because we're not producing an explicit enough positive, I guess is the way to put it. We're satisfying needs that don't need to exist. Deal with that sentence. We're satisfying needs that don't need to exist. That's a problem.
Without any reasonable proof, which claims that all life is bad, and that suffering...
Yeah, that's not what it claims. So, what's the point of making this argument that you don't like the way other people argue if you're going to argue inaccurately and unfairly and butcher the argument? The argument that isn't that it's all bad, is that the argument is that the good is basically a construct of the existence of life. That it creates a negative that's good, that we clean up some of the negative. But life itself isn't intrinsically good. A living human is not an intrinsically productive beastie.
Outweighs any quality of life that could be experienced in the longitudinal lifespan of a human being.
Or in other words, that the suffering has real weight, and the superficial and trivial satisfactions and gratifications are basically made out of an ego deprivation need mechanism, a mechanism that doesn't need to even exist. You don't need to need. Okay, they're contrived, they're culturally influenced, they're psychologically influenced, but theoretically you could need to help other people. That could be the thing that gave you an orgasm. We could construct human beings that that's the way it works. It's all arbitrary what gets you off. But the point is the getting off process is only in its, even in its perfect condition, is still only able to fix things that didn't need to get broken in the first place. Don't break it, you don't have to make it. Kind of thing.
It's notoriously difficult to pin down and discuss qualitative data, which is something.
Well, yeah, I know but that's like I said. Banatar sort of made it, gave a little more clarity to that, so it's not notorious anymore. But yeah, it's difficult to discuss things in an environment where we claim an equality to all statements. All opinions are somehow equal. Somebody can just say, I'm happy, that's my opinion. And nobody can say, well, I don't think you really are qualitatively up to a standard that should be acceptable. I think your life sucks, and it is your ignorance and delusion that makes you believe that you're accomplishing something. I can critique a heroin addict because it's popular to do so. And that's sort of the distinction. The distinction doesn't fall on some sort of legitimate line. We're just making the distinction based on what has traditionally been approved of behavior and what's traditionally not approved of behavior. I would argue that, yeah, let's just break that down and let's analyze everybody and let's force everybody to justify their existence and explain exactly how they're accomplishing something, that they're cleaning up some messes that had to be here, that were necessary to be here, that the mess needed to be made. And that you're going to have a hard time doing, I think.
Ultimately examining with regards to quality of life and the measuring, which is very impossible, of pain versus pleasure.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's that impossible, and I think if we try to find mechanisms that make it more, that oblige people to see it as a choice, not as an inevitability, not as something that just happens, but something that they make happen. And if we could actually put the price of life, the circumstances in front of people and say, this is what you will pay for it. You will have a week of this and 2 weeks of that, and you will have 3 years of that and 6 years of this. If we could put it in front of them instead of behind them and say, would you buy this for this will be your grand accomplishment, smiley face grandchildren or something. Yeah, you would say, no, I wouldn't purchase, I won't make that purchase. You will, in fact, sacrifice the smiley facey to negate the hard, awful, if you knew it was coming. Everybody just is too hopeful. They assume they're going to be the lucky one. They're going to avoid the really, really bad stuff.
So again, I feel like the entire discussion is nothing more than a sort of banshee-like wail of subjectively driven egocentrism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can say that kind of shit, but and then to assume though that people won't find that offensive, it's just nonsense. You smelly pig, you slimy, dirty-minded, dirty-bodied, dirty. Your eyeballs are probably filthy. You stinking, scuzzy turd ball. I mean, really, you can't, you're just overtly offensive and then you claim some right to be above it. And you're just not. You're just such a manipulative turd.
Very honest with you.
Come on,
So,
YouTube.
Anyway, I just
Come on, YouTube.
thought I'd say that. Bye for now. Ta-ta.
Ta-ta. Yeah, another one of your insincere little tatas. Ta-ta. So anyway, yeah, you're a tribute to insincerity. You're a monument to it. Spectacular pile of shit to it. Alright, so anyway, then, conference report. To be serious, made some sort of scientific metaphor video. I don't know what her point was exactly. But anyway, this whole subject of metaphor, Jay Sounder made a video, audio video, just making the argument that there's a thing called the truth, and we can kind of describe it. We don't need to keep using cartoons to describe reality. We can start getting a little serious here. And, it's sort of been in the air, and then Piro's just been doing crap all over the place. Doesn't even make any sense at all anymore. But yeah, these metaphors are just very destructive. There's lots of words that don't belong in our vocabulary. Words that don't mean anything. Even words that are really used a lot, like freedom, that people don't really understand what that is. It's too much of a metaphor. A metaphor for escaping a burden. And then other people are using it for some kind of, as if there's some sort of, as if you can have freedom without a burden. Yeah, I don't think so. Or the threat of burden. The threat of confinement. That freedom would make any sense in a world where there wasn't some threat of confinement. No. So anyway, computer's running a little slow here. Come on. Load me my video. So I don't know if I can't really play all of this, I guess. But, I mean, it was just kind of an annoying, snarky video in a way. And I don't think it was earned.
Okay, this is the response to your video, Jay Sounder, on language, truth, metaphor, on Logodome. I mean, it sounds to me quite, being quite pejorative about metaphor there, and I can kind of understand why, for all kinds of reasons, because metaphor and figurative language generally is used to sell all kinds of unworthy products. But I think you've got some misunderstandings going on there quite a bit as well, to be frank. And it's the kind of misunderstandings which is leading you to make pretty serious mistakes. I mean, just as a matter of interest, I was listening to your video.
Yeah, see, I really don't think you're going to demonstrate any of that. So I think that's just, I don't think there's some mistake. What he was saying was pretty clear. There's a truth to be described, and we either accurately describe it or we fucking lie. And it's quite obvious to me that it was even the video I made before this, that yeah, all it is a fucking lie. It's all covered in lies. Nobody talks about the reality. Nobody talks about it as a reality. Everybody just talks around it with this fluffy bullshit. Mother Nature. That's not a fucking reality. It's not even close to an accurate description. It's a pile of fucking shit in our way. It's a horrible, lousy, rotten metaphor. And there's a ton of them out there that are just a part of our fucking language, and they really should be. I'm going to make an effort to avoid this shit.
Kind of with my metaphor analysis head on, and imagining pressing a button every time you use the metaphor. And I'm pressing it every 2 or 3 seconds, because you're constantly using metaphors. They're just unacknowledged.
Yeah, that's just because of our language, again, because it's been broken by a bunch of pseudoscience, by a bunch of nonsense and drivel and crap. And we have been taught to take these shortcuts, to say shithead instead of uninformed idiot. I mean, it's all over the place. But yeah, maybe we should just stop doing it.
Once, and I think it's just worth mentioning, as I mentioned in the previous video actually, that there's 2 kinds of metaphors, essentially. There's kind of literary and poetic metaphors, the one that you referred to as like the sun going down like a rose. Poetic, flowery, literary metaphor. And then there's a metaphor we use in common speech, what is sometimes called cognitive metaphors, which is the fabric of our understanding. And it's often unacknowledged. We like to think that we're plain speakers, and we can be for large parts of for something.
Yeah, well, I think we can be for everything. So that's the canard here, okay? That this shouldn't be part of our language. Our language is polluted and perverted by these metaphors. We are anthropomorphizing the entire language, and we've not only done it from this, human mid-size object crap argument that you kind of make, but also in terms of our motives and in terms of intent. This is all, we don't even have common words to use to describe something's utility without connecting it to purpose and to mission and to intent. I mean, I fall into this trap all the time because you don't have the proper vocabulary to describe in as few words as possible the concept of something having a mission statement, a mission, that is part of its circumstantial position, like the selfish gene is an example that To Be Serious used. Yeah, obviously a gene is not selfish. It's not functioning as a human being or as a life form. It's functioning as a bit of chemistry, but it is, in a sense, being conformed by environment that tells it what it's going to be allowed to do. So it's not the selfish gene, it's the confined purpose gene. Now we use the word purpose, so purpose is another invalidated word because what it does in the human brain. So now it has to be the function. So the narrow design function gene, or we'll come up with some other metaphor that would describe, some other description, some other detailed, explicit definition of what it is. And what it is a piece of chemistry that doesn't have the option to be compassionate. It doesn't have the option to make choices and do the right thing for the most amount of people, to be productive by some sort of high-minded definition. And let's take high-minded out of there and say, well, logically perfected perspective. I think that's okay. So, but yeah, we can do this. We could get rid of these damn metaphors, and then maybe we could have an actual conversation about reality. Maybe.
It can be plain speakers. But the fabric of our speech typically is not plain. It is necessarily metaphorical, and it's metaphorical.
Yeah, and see, it's not necessarily. That's where you've got it wrong. Sorry, it's not necessarily metaphorical. It's metaphorical for the necessity of the purpose of the people sort of like you, who just don't want to look at reality, don't want to face it as for what it is, and keep trying to find some way to paint on it, to fix it, to color it up, to do something with it. Because what it is, in truth, in basic fact, is not good enough. And everybody fucking would know that if we just admit what it is, instead of keep doing this pretty, touch, fluff bullshit.
Because of reasons you should also have sympathy with. Because we are evolved beings on a small planet orbiting a class 3 star. We evolved these brains to survive in this environment. We evolved brains that are really good at talking about rocks and trees and that kind of thing, and yet somehow we seem to have developed the capacity to talk about quarks and justice and love and truth and, philosophy, science, politics, those kind of things. And the way we haven't just suddenly evolved new brains to do that. We're still using the old brains, but with my...
Yeah, well, all those things are the same thing as a tree, Fred. I really don't get the difference. We have a brain that's capable of modeling. That's what it does. It models things, and it runs models. And one of the models are logical, cognitive models built on the information we gain about how the world functions. So yeah, we're able to model. The models we were doing in the old days were about avoiding getting eaten by a lion, and now the models today might be the solar system or the galaxy or the function of, subatomic particles. It's the same thing. The brain is doing the same thing. All right? It's running models. And the problem with models is garbage in, garbage out. That's the problem here. Logic is broken by wrong premises, and when we have vocabulary that's covered in inaccurate and distortive metaphors, then yeah, there's no logic to be had.
To develop this way of doing it, whereby our brains are thinking about these complex, interesting, abstract ideas by using metaphors of simple things like trees and rocks. And it isn't just about language, that's how thought works. Thought is largely...
Yeah, well, I don't think that's true either. Okay, we're not seeding it with fake or metaphors. We seed our understanding with actual images. When I visualize the solar system, I can visualize it using real telescopic imagery, and then because I have some knowledge, I can three-dimensionalize that. And because I've seen some animations by a computer, I can do a little better than that even. but I don't see where I'm metaphoring anywhere. I'm not seeing teapots floating around in space, and they're not don't got little smiley faces on the planets or something. So yeah, I don't think there's a need for metaphor for a lot of our cognitive or substantive thinking about what it is to be a medium-sized object and a medium-sized blah blah in the medium-sized universe blah blah blah.
Figurative. Language is just one of the ways that reveals itself. Gesture is another. Image is another. Body posture is another. So proximity. There's lots and lots of different ways in which the figurations of our thinking, the poetic nature of all our thought.
No, it's just a way to create a bias, and that's all that stuff does, and you know it. Music just is a way to create a bias. The images can just be a way to create a bias. They're valuable tools if they're used, yeah, very carefully and explicitly, but that's not how we use them. We tend to try to associate things with things, all right, and we cheat the truth that way more often than not. So again, I'm not arguing that metaphor has no value. I'm not arguing that imperfect or inexplicit statements have no value. But I'm just going to argue, though, that this is hugely dangerous, and that the substance of its use in the world, the substance of the use of metaphor in the world, is not to create clarity, it's to create confusion, distortion, to make things seem other than they are.
Reveals itself. But language is probably the best, you know, because it's the clearest and most easy to analyse and so on. As I say, we do use metaphor a lot, but it's not the poetic metaphor, it's cognitive metaphor. That's the key thing about it. And we have to do that because of who we are and how we evolved.
No, we do not have to do it. I don't think there's any need anywhere, and I think Jay's video is a pretty good description of it. We have lots of words in the dictionary. They have explicit definitions. We can use those words. We don't have to keep doing this less than accurate, more emotionally fun use of language. We should be explicit.
The other thing I think we need to disabuse ourselves of is this idea that if we accept the omnipresence of cognitive metaphor and the fact that much of our thinking is figurative, that means we can't access truth. Of course we can access truth. We can access truth very well indeed. It just isn't quite what we thought it was. We just have to reimagine what it means to say something that's true. The fact that I can say something and you can understand...
Yeah, well, I don't get any of that either. No. I mean, I think there is a truth. You got to quit asking the wrong questions. The truth is revealed, I guess, through the right questions. An explicit question and it has an explicit answer. You know, a lot of this, there are yes or no answers. There are.
And I can make predictions about the world, and you can share those predictions, and we can confirm the results of those predictions. That doesn't change just because the language that I'm using to express it and the thoughts that I'm using to conceive it are metaphorical. You're sharing that language and you're sharing those thoughts. You know, we're sharing cognitive...
Yeah, well, even the word prediction is dangerous, though, because it's the predictions about what the past was, right? We're basically going to argue over predictions, you know, guesstimations, theories of what is the context of our existence. And that's the part I've been waiting for here, is I want you to get to this frame thing, because you know, just in case I run out of time, you know, because somehow you changed his use of the metaphor to widen the frame, you know, the broadest frame of reference, into some sort of hierarchy thing, or somehow now it's a more absolute statement. No, he's just saying that the only fucking truth that matters is the truth from the widest context. The only truth that matters in the game of chess is the entire game board. It is not the individual pawn. It is not the individual move. It is the entire play of the game that matters. So the widest frame is the frame. And if you're not accounting for context of the widest perspective, then you're failing to see the truth.
Daydreams together, but they do resolve to truth in many cases. That's, there's nothing, the truth doesn't disappear when you use metaphor. And similarly, fairies and unicorns don't suddenly appear and become viable. They might populate literary metaphor and poetic metaphor, but there's no reason why they should suddenly become part of our material reality just because we've recognized that we think and understand things in a certain way. That's just flat out wrong.
Well, I'm sorry though, it's not flat out wrong, because we see what people believe in. Voodoo economics. So we see the fairies and the gremlins and the bullshit that is inside of everything, because people don't understand it for what it is, they understand for what it isn't. And it's those things are in there. With all the cupcakes are the things that have gummed up the scare work. It's all these fucking human cupcakes.
The other key thing I think is to do with the value of this kind of way of thinking, and it should be a value to you too, Jay. I think because one of the things about people who claim to be able to the things about people who claim to be able to speak plainly, they're people who say, I don't use metaphor, and as you kind of do in this video sometimes, or I reject the whole idea of metaphor and figurative thinking. It's quite often that's an authority claim, and it's an authority claim which many people who are opposed to the idea...
Yeah, whatever. It's not an authority claim, it's a claim based on credibility. So yeah, it's an argument being made. It's a theory that this is a much more rational way to communicate, is with real concepts, not fake ones. So let's get rid of the bullshit language, let's get rid of the bullshit words that have no meaning. Freedom, random, spontaneous, all these nonsense words, all these words, love. You just, people keep using this word like it means something, doesn't mean a motherfucking thing, has no standard definition, is totally useless bullshit. So let's call it what it is. Lust, or emotional dependency, or, yeah, well, we're not going to like that, are we? Because those fucking literal definitions are not very charming, are they? No, they're not. We'll find out that the truth is that love is not made out of anything good. It's actually made out of shit. Okay, it's not made out of shit. It's made out of bits of emotional dependency, negative, generally understood to be negative, not high-minded, not actualized, not complete. What's the word I'm looking for? But anyway, the point is that we'll find that there's a crudeness to it, a selfishness to it. All right, that it's an ugly, not a pretty.
Ideas that you like, particularly the antinatalist ideas, used quite a bit. I've heard words like obvious used a lot. I mean, I know you've used the word obvious a lot as well, but it's claims for the obvious are always suspect, because they're about plainness of thinking and plainness of evidence.
Yeah, right. That's and yeah, that's what's sort of pissing me off here. Is yeah, the obvious. So everybody's got to find an excuse to avoid it, right? We got to go back to Professor Anton and get lessons in blurring your vision. Squint your eyes. Don't see the fucking truth. Don't see what's fucking obvious. Don't see what the evidence points to with the biggest, giantest arrows. No, go find little arrows somewhere that are pointing in sideways directions. Yeah. And then to call that a manipulation. No, sorry. No sale.
And evidence isn't always plain, and speaking and thinking is almost never plain. So it's always worth thinking about that.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you're building it. And if you build it right, it is plain. I mean, obviously people can pretend to, again, do something that Jay didn't suggest, which is take something in a small frame and then talk about obvious in the small frame. Yeah, what's obvious in the small frame may not be meaningful in the larger frame. It's obvious from the pawn who's being sacrificed in the game you know, from its perspective, that there's something wrong going on. Obviously, from the bigger picture view, it would be argued that the game can't be played unless you're willing to be sacrificed.
And in relation to that, I mean, you yourself sneak in a couple of metaphors there. Covert metaphors, metaphors which aren't on the surface. You don't advertise them as metaphors, but they are. And they are truth claim, authority claim metaphors. For example, you use the word basic 2 or 3 times.
Why are you connecting truth to authority? And because, well, authority already has a negative connotation, but if we took authority as an explicit word, as an explicit definition, authority would be somebody who's qualified, somebody who is researched and knowledgeable, competent, professional, all these kind of words would be an authority. So there's nothing wrong with that intrinsically. It's kind of good for there to be opining by the authority. So combining these words, it just is that is in itself, again, another one of these, that's a kind of metaphor, right? This connecting of things that aren't necessarily supposed to be connected.
And you use the word foundation 2 or 3 times. Now think about that. A basic and foundation, these are really well explored metaphors, by the way. It's been written about quite a lot. Metaphors are...
Right, so now you're going to turn basic, basic is a pretty explicit word, right? We can deal with that. And foundational is just an extension of the word. So you've taken something and added a little bit to it by calling